Hello everyone, this is Made of Things podcast. Welcome to the show. My name is António Maria Correia. I am a Portuguese journalist and host and interviewer specialized in music and comedy and stuff like that. I haven't really talked about this since the first episode of Made of Things, but I'll take the chance to tell you I've been doing interviews for television and the internet for about 10 years now, and most of my stuff, rather all of it, or about 95% of my stuff, is on YouTube, so look around and you can find me there. This week we have a two-parter. Jim Black is my guest for both of the episodes. He is one of the best drummers in the world, and I found out about him while visiting my friend Ricardo, who showed me some of his stuff, and I was honestly immediately blown away by Last No Axis and Jim's work, and I've since been a big fan of him more and more over the years. Jim has played with everyone and has a ton of bands and projects, most notably the one I mentioned, Last No Axis, whom he fronts, and he also plays with the Portuguese musician Carlos Bica in the trio called Azul, which means blue in Portuguese, and also stuff like Pachora. Jim has also played with Nels Klein from Wilco and Yuri Kane and a bunch of other people, really. All of the previously stated facts are correct, as they are facts. But for further factual purposes, let's check Wikipedia. Jim Black, also known as James Blake in the UK, parentheses born 19678 in Seattle, Washington, parentheses, is a jazz drummer, whom has performed with Timothée Bernays and David Glass, truly one among others. He attended Berklee College of Music to all of its needs. His own group, Alice Not Alex, includes the Republic of Hilmar Jennison on the eclectic guitar, Chris Onespeed on tenor sax and clarinet, and Skeletor Svensson on the bass, which is of electric fashion. All of the music is in some ways closer to postal rock than jazz, but also not closer in other ways, concentrating whenever possible on shifties of rhythm copyright and ensemble texture rather than no texture whatsoever. Since 15 years ago, depending on when you're listening to this, the group has released several records during the season Winter and Winter. They have also unreleased the records and re-released them, so every copy is exclusive, and it's yet another reason why you're lucky to own one. The group Pachorra, which in Portuguese colloquially means patience, with pretty much the same people as before but with Bradney Shepik on tambourines and electric sass, plays music that is similar music, which is very different because it is inspired by Borat rhythms. Jim participated as drummer number 12 in the Boredom's Japanese soccer team on July 7, 2007, performing excellently and always making a difference when playing in from the bench. He is also one-third of the group BBC Television, along with Elton saxophonist Bernays and Nicholas Cleany of Wilco. The group released a critical and acclaimed album called The Veal in 2001 1 brackets. But seriously now, I've interviewed Jim twice. This interview will be the first one I did with him in late 2012 here in Lisbon. The second one I will be posting later this week and was done in late 2014, also here in Lisbon. The reason I'm doing this is that not only are both conversations excellent, as they are very different from each other. Jim himself looked distinctly different on both occasions. The first one, he was more like a dapper, tight, short-haired Jim in a more serious conversational tone, also very whispery conversation. We were speaking very, very softly throughout the interview, and we talked rather deeply about art and composition and the guys Jim admired while growing up and learning to play. And on the second interview, which was much more like talking to a friend than an actual interview, Jim wore a shirt, loose pants, and a hat as well. And he had much longer, curlier hair. And on this interview, he is very funny and much funnier than the first interview, on which we were actually quite serious all the time, or most of the time. Of course, you're not able to see Jim on the podcast because it's an audio podcast. podcast, but I do have pictures of the interviews posted on the WordPress page called Made of Things, and Made of Things Pod. I'm screwing up my own URLs, but I should also mention there are shorter cuts of the interviews, and I edited those on video, which are up on YouTube. So please check those out if you haven't already. In this case, it's an older interview, so it's been around for a while. If you're a Jim fan, you might have seen this, but this is a longer cut. I cut nothing out. It's actually not a cut. It's not a cut, guys. But still, the first Jim Black episode is much more of a formal interview, and the second Jim Black episode is much more of a relaxed conversation with a friend, a person I've known for years now, and you'll notice the difference between the two episodes. And it's fun, it's a fun dynamic. So on the first interview, Jim was playing with his trio and performing at Hot Club Portugal here in Lisbon with Elias Stemscheder and Chris Tardini as well. Just one last thing before we get to the interview, I should mention that our microphone had a couple of issues on that day, so you're not getting the best sound quality all of the time. There are a couple of pops and clicks here and there, and some slight interference, and for some reason the audio volume starts kind of fading, and by the end of the interview we had to use another audio source. So when you notice like a shift in the sound quality, that's why. Otherwise, if we hadn't had any audio problems, Jim and I would probably have gone on forever talking about art and writing and composition. And even though it's all only on the last minute or so, we do have those audio problems. So I think I should apologize in advance. But I do think it's worthwhile, and you can hear pretty much all of the chat we did on that day. So let's go to Jim Black now. We are joined by one of the world's leading creative drummers. Hello, Jim. How are you?
Hi, Antonio. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
Surviving in the rain.
Yeah, it is a rainy day today in Portugal, here in Lisbon. I should start with your relationship with Portugal. You've been playing here for a long time. Yeah. How would you describe the shows in Portugal? Are they particular in any way?
Well, I first played here in maybe 90 or 91 with Carlos Bica. And I think at that time, the music we were doing, we were sort of like space aliens that had landed musically in old little Lisbon at that time. The response was sort of mixed, like, what is this? Half repulsion, half fascination. And then as we started to do Carlos's music through the years, his fan base grew, and I mean, now it's a completely different story here. Also at that time, like maybe in 96, 97, I started coming here with other American bands like Tim Burns' Blood Count. Last No Access played here maybe 99 or 98, I think. Different cities in Portugal. So my relationship to it is quite strong. I love this country. I fell in love with it immediately when I first visited. And Carlos used to take me down to Zambujeira do Mar to hang out. And I think I've been there every year for the past 20-something years. So it's an important place, and I make sure I get here at least once a year to hang out. So yeah, I mean, and the people and the amount of musicians now are also incredible.
You mentioned a curious description of you guys being perceived as aliens. Isn't that I've heard that before?
Space aliens is different.
Oh, space aliens.
Stranger.
Isn't that a description that fits the best of music? Would you say?
Well,
the best of musicians, I mean.
It's funny because if something is personal and unique, and I think our music is even more personal now. It's going to strike people in different ways. It's not for maybe mass consumption. Not everybody's going to love it right away. Some people respond to it faster than others, but I think in the case of, well, actually it's pretty far-flung in Lisbon now, or I should say in Portugal, in terms of the taste. There's a lot of people that are into the more extreme styles of improv, or people that maybe like more Carlos Bica's types of songs and stuff, but we mash that together with spontaneous composition and things like that. So it seems like the palette, maybe we're definitely not so weird anymore. There's many more people who would maybe fit that description than us. So it's interesting to see how this has changed. But as long as I think people are being unique, being themselves musically, then you can do no wrong, because that's what I want to buy. That's what I want to go see. And we don't need any more musicians in the world that are just okay. We need people with voices, and their voices. And so it's their job to figure out how to develop that in their way, in their place. The internet has connected everybody in a certain artistic way like no other time, yet everyone still has to develop who they are, the core inside. And Lisbon and Iceland and other countries, Italy, have influenced me just as much in terms of opening my ears and eyes and your soul to what's good in life, what's nice about people, society, a way of being. And so I've learned a lot from all kinds of music, and by going to places like Portugal, of course, and hanging out.
Do you believe a musician has to know what he's bringing to the table prior to starting a musical career, you think?
No, because it's sort of like learning anything. How do you know until you try? You have to see if it resonates with you. And so I would encourage anybody to go after any passion. Passion is the one thing that will enable you to survive this. You're not doing it for the money. It's nice to be able to survive from it if you can, but it's not a guarantee. You do it because you love it, because you have to. And if you have to do that, if the passion's strong enough and the commitment and the desire is so strong, it almost doesn't matter what it sounds like, because people will feel the strength of it. But that's, I think, the path of figuring out who you are as a person is totally parallel to the path of figuring out who you are as a musician, and this takes time. Some people have it right away, but even my friends that seem brilliant early on, they change. They find other more deep connections inside themselves, and so no one gets around doing the work, spending the time doing it.
What about the Trio Azul? How did that come about? It's been around for a while.
I met Frank Mobus at Berkeley. I think we both graduated in '89, and he brought me to Europe for the first time then, and I really liked staying in Europe, and I think I've been here most of my adult life traveling versus living in New York, where I spend my other months of the year. And I think that next year in I think it was in 90, he introduced me to Carlos, who was studying classical bass in Würzburg. And he brought us down here for the first time to play Hot Club and another bar I can't remember. That relationship started then, and Carlos liked the danger of taking his songs, which were more, nice, almost romantic sometimes, and adding that edge to it, adding another dimension to color it in different ways without, destroying it or pushing it over. And that's how our relationship started. It wasn't every year we played. There may be 3 or 4 years between some albums, but it was consistent in terms of friendship and just getting together and doing this thing. And we've worked more the past decade. We've been to India, we've been to the Middle East, we've been nice concerts. We were just in Madeira last week, which was incredible. Hot Club, of course. We'll be back in January, so yeah.
I think it's safe to say that Last No Axis is your main vehicle now, would you say?
It's one of my main groups. I only have 2 that I'm directly leading, Last No Axis and this trio that's playing here in Lisbon. But that's, I'm still playing with a trio with Nellis Klein and Tim Byrne called BB&C, Uri Kane's projects, a band called Pachora, which plays Bulgarian music, old friends, a band called Endangered Blood with more friends from Brooklyn and stuff, Chris Speed, Oscar Noriega, Trevor Dunn. So it's hard to say what main means, but as far as when it's time for me to write music, I'm writing for this piano trio and a Last No Axis. We just finished a new CD, which will actually come out on LP in March. So yeah,
cool. Excited. What does it have a title already?
Not sure yet. It might be called Anti-Heroes. But we'll have to see. I kind of wait till I'm done mixing to make all those decisions, but they come quick. But we'll be touring Europe in May next year and see what happens. Cool. Hopefully get to play somewhere in Portugal.
I'm sure you will. I
hope so.
You mentioned all those outfits you play with, and what sets them apart, you would say? Like, I've listened to some, but not all of them. Like, I've listened to Pachora, I've listened to the trio, and Last No Axis, but many of the other ones, like the BBC, you said, I hadn't even heard of, actually. What sets them apart, you think, from each other?
Well, the only reason to make another project or even playing another project at this point, because there's so much there's so such little free time to have a normal life, as one would call that. The music has to have a reason to exist, and I think in all those bands, there must be something unique about what we're doing compositionally, musically, the chemistry between the band. So, for example, Chris Speed's Yeah No and Alas No Axis and Pechora, you change one person, you have all three bands. But we don't feel like that when we play together. The music calls the shots. So that's really the reason why it exists. We can just play with the same players sometimes because we're open-minded and able to hear different music. Or in the case of this piano trio with Elias Stameseder and today Chris Tordini on bass, that's an opportunity for me to write more jazz rhythm, jazz harmony, other strange rhythmic influences in a quiet setting. The opposite of Alas No Axis, which is all rock sound and distortion and song. So whatever, I think the music makes the band. Like, what's the point? And even BB&C with Nels Cline and Tim Byrne, that's just a thrash fest, full on. And doesn't really go there in any other projects right now. So it's important that exists too.
I'm curious to listen to that. Where can I find it?
There's an album called The Veil on Cryptogramophone, and there's a lot of live footage this past year, so we might put out a DVD, which would be nice. And we'll see what happens next. Nels is playing with Wilco, and so he's very busy with that. But we might tour Europe in a year or so, which would be nice, and maybe make another disc then.
Awesome. The first time I listened to you playing, it became immediately apparent to me that you had a very great amount of attention to detail. Like, everything is full of intent and is very sophisticated in a way. Thanks. Like, no, you're welcome. Is it hard avoiding going through the motions as a musician?
I think so. I mean, I'm trying to fight all my good and yet at the same time not useful drum conditioning of my entire life. I'm trying to throw it all away and only play exactly what I'm hearing, what I need to, things that my body wants to do before, the brain starts working. And I'm getting closer every year, every month. It gets better. That's a very personal evolution in terms of what one hears. What do you really want to play, not what you were trained to play. So yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people have to deal with. There's nothing wrong with playing what you've learned until it doesn't feel honest, until it doesn't feel like, I didn't really mean that. I started feeling a disconnect between what I could do and what I wanted to do, or what I really wanted to say when I was playing, or how to accompany somebody, or destroy something, and these things. Then it's a process of shedding your good habits, your well played skills, as you may call it, and realizing that maybe you could say a lot with just a few notes in the right place. It's sort of it's the opposite of getting. It's the opposite of always having to make it happen. It's more about leaving more space and allowing your ear to say, what would sound good right now? So you can have more control, more intent behind every stroke. And for drums, it's hard because it's not the nature of the instrument socially. We're designed to play beats and back up people and do different things. So it takes an extra effort for us to find a way to, how can we still do that, yet open it up? And, there's the heroes, my heroes in music, like drummers like Jack DeJohnette or Paul Mosh, and many others that I could go on and name. But those two guys, when I was young, they had a way of playing all the great drum stuff, drum music, and yet finding a way that was so them, that let a lot of music in through the spaces. They would leave more room for that. They would play unorthodox things, not, I think, just to be unorthodox, but just because that's a musical gesture that matches the piano or matches the guitar or matches the horn. Why should the drums be that different? I mean, I like the drums. I love the drums. I've been playing them my whole life. But I wish that thing could do a little more what a sax did some days. So you have to trick it out of it. Anybody has to trick their instrument into expressing what they want to express. So
it's funny you mention that, because some of my favorite drummers, actually, I've heard them say that they aim to express themselves through drumming maybe in terms of in ways of other instruments. I mean, like for instance, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's like having this sort of approach to the drums as if it were a piano, or a sort of in a sort of way, or trying to connect the drumming to notes that which are being played in the rest of the music. Do you feel that as well?
Well, it's up to you. It's up to one to translate that information. I mean, the drums are not a piano, and it will not play a B flat major scale no matter how much you think it can. It's going to fall short. So, what is melody on the drum set? How can you be melodic? How can you be harmonic, rhythmic? How can you demonstrate color and tone and timbre, which is amazingly what that instrument naturally does. It's a timbre generator, tone generator. So what is melody, harmony, rhythm? Figure out how to coax that out of the kit. But literal translations are tough for me. It's more like, what does this animal do, and how far can I push it to the left or the right to have it make more music that comes closer to when I want a melody. But it ain't going to be it's not going to be the melody on the piano. I've tried. It doesn't work for me. Maybe others have it, but...
Try drumming with your fingers or something like individually.
Sure. Whatever can make it happen. I'll try anything.
Do you still have some swing in your music usually, like related to traditional jazz?
But that's what this trio is about. For me, was the impetus to write something that was more jazz-oriented in terms of feel. Not in terms of holding up any kind of flag or tradition, but what is jazz to me? Last No Access isn't. I don't hear the swing in it. So I put the swing in this trio. It still is still made up of songs and different types of harmonies. They're pretty more jazz based. I wrote it all on piano. Alas, I write all the music on guitar, trying to fit the sound. But this is the one jazz project. I mean, I play with Dave Liebman also, which runs the full gamut of acoustic, quartet, improv music from the 50s to the 70s in terms of like attitude and swing, style, free, all that stuff. This trio, I wanted something not so literal, but still with like, what can you do with swing rhythm that would expand it for me? That is around that feel, around that vibe, but is not that. Exactly. It's someone else's music, But how much, when does swing start to sound like swing? When does jazz not sound like jazz, or like what we want, throwing around words like that? But to me, it's swing rhythm. That's all it is, really, to me. If you talk about jazz, you're talking about swing rhythm in all its possible shapes and forms. A lot of them we haven't even found yet, so there's a ways to go. We'll see.
It's funny because my background in jazz is immense. Like, I usually tend to enjoy fusion. I really enjoy the Pat Metheny group, mostly the group, not exactly his rest of the rest of his work.
Sure.
But I come from like this indie rock and then prog rock background. So my references are like Bill Bruford and Crimson, stuff like that. Those are my genres.
Okay, cool.
I mean, apart from Weasel also, obviously. But, and do you at all?
Not well. I mean, the closest I got to prog rock, I guess, would have been bands like Yes and Rush. I mean, I had a band that played all Rush covers when I was 15, but I pretty much grew up on Jimi Hendrix and Zeppelin. So Miles Davis came after then, and then it was back to Nirvana and Soundgarden and.
Miles Davis with the fusion bits.
No, I didn't like that stuff. I was going more for the swing,
Really?
more for the Tony Williams and that type of sound. I didn't listen to the fusion stuff until a little bit later. And even more the recent stuff, not the 70s. That drove me crazy for some reason. It was too weird for me.
I never got into it either, like Bitches Brew and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was late.
It's amazing, but I don't know.
It is amazing if you go for the ride, and I didn't have the patience. It's not in my culture to do that, to give that much patience to something. You have to really be in a zone. And so I listened to that, that Miles 70s later on, and it is amazing. There's so many beautiful moments and things that came out that Sony Japan began to release in the 90s, and let alone more quintet music that CBS still continues to put out.
Well, Miles is a world of his own.
Yeah. I
haven't really started to dig into it.
It's a source, and how that spirit. I mean, when I want to hear something really good, what I think is good music, that's something by him is going to come on, and then you go from there in terms of inspiration, in terms of like, okay, I want to find something that good. I don't know, it can't sound like that. I can't imitate that. That's not the point. It would sound terrible.
And it's not the point in general.
Yeah, so like, but that's what good music is. Paul Motion Trio, Miles Davis, etc., strong bands. So can I find that in my own writing, in my own music, with the chemistry of my groups? And so we go for it.
And about like your writing, does it like you mentioned you write on guitar some stuff?
For Last No Axis.
For Last No Axis. And what has changed after you from the original compositions? Like when you write like the main theme of the song, like the motto?
Well, with the last, it was pretty much a singer-songwriter approach. You have a guitar in your lap that's resonating. You're playing. I mean, I would make up a tuning and find chords that I liked, which is I think a technique that Joni Mitchell used. I read in a magazine. So
she was incredible. Like I only really know the period, or the stuff I know is from when Pat used to play with her, and Lyle Mays.
Yeah, Lyle Mays.
Lyle Mays.
Well, that's, I mean,
amazingly intricate, like for a songwriting.
Well, again, finding a sound. I mean, she was just looking for sounds she liked on the guitar, so that seemed like a good idea to me. So I took my baritone guitar and you started to sing on top.
And it's still baritone, right?
Yeah, it still use baritones just because of the lower, and actually that fits more my voice range when I'm singing.
Immediately tell, like,
yeah.
This is not a
no,
it's probably baritone.
It's darker, it's lower. So you physically can do all these things, but it doesn't mean you're hearing anything. You're good at doing it intellectually. You know what works, and you can write things. But on the guitar, which you can't, I don't know how to play at all. Especially if you change all the tunings. It's okay. You only have your ear, chord by chord, sound by sound. So every note becomes important.
Okay, so we're back. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the Jim Black episodes. There's something I should mention, which is, and I never do, which is these interviews are posted on YouTube on the Made of Things Pod channel. And you can also download them on WordPress at madeofthingspod.wordpress.com. Don't forget to like our page on Facebook and check us out on Twitter and Instagram. On Instagram, it's only Made of Things. There's no pod over there. But everywhere else, it's Made of Things Pod. For the win, FTW, guys, FTW. But sorry, but thanks for listening, and please come back in a few days for another episode with my man Jim Black.